Thanks everyone for coming to our cat chat on the language of love, keeping your relationships healthy and happy. Okay, so we're going to start off with communication styles. Who knows about communication styles? You can shout it out if you're loud enough or ask for the mic. Anything in terms of communication styles that you've heard? Yeah. Verbal, nonverbal. What else? Informative, persuasive. Okay. Yeah. See, folks have taken communication courses. The types of communication styles that we're going to talk about today, unfortunately, are none of those. But then maybe you'll learn something new. So, who's heard of aggressive communication style? Or thought someone had an aggressive communication style? No one? Just me? Okay. So aggressive communication, folks who have this type of communication style tend to put others down in order to protect themselves. They might demand things be done their way, and they're pretty willing to achieve goals at the expense of others. So it's not a super effective communication style. Maybe now with that information you can think of a few people where this has come into play for you. Okay, the next one is passive. Passive person doesn't like to make anyone feel uncomfortable or displeased, but also feels anxious or sometimes ignored, or might feel manipulated and angry. These people don't tend to put a lot of emphasis on what they need. They tend to look at the needs of other folks. Passive aggressive. Okay, now I know folks have heard of this, right? Head nods, yeah, laughing. So folks who are passive aggressive need to fight in order to be heard, even if they have to do it in a manipulative way, which is where the rest of us kind of get irritated. Sometimes people who fall under this communication style can feel confused or angry, but they can be a little bit unsure why. The next one, assertive. Anyone heard of this communication style? Yes, head nods, okay. So folks who are assertive respect their rights and the rights of others. They feel a responsibility to protect their rights and respect other people, but not necessarily the behavior of other people. So folks who tend to have this more assertive communication style, they attend to the behavior and not the person. So like, hey, I really didn't like when you said this, not you're such a horrible person because you said this, right? Feels like a big difference when you're on the receiving end of that. Another thing to note is that culture can play a large role in our communication as well as our perception of communication. So it's helpful when you're talking with other folks, especially with romantic partners, to understand what cultural backgrounds each person is coming from and how they view communication and how they perceive communication as well. Sometimes one person can say something in an assertive way or their perception of an assertive way, but it comes off maybe as aggressive to their partner. So getting on the same page about those things can be really helpful. Communication styles. So there are two types of communication styles that we're going to talk about today. One is the pursuer. Those folks need to talk about things like right in the moment and get everything sorted right then and there. Otherwise, they feel really anxious or uncomfortable. Other folks tend to need some more time to cool off. They tend to be the withdrawers, prefer to like take a break and cool down and then come back to the conversation later after they've had some time to think about it. Both styles are okay, but it's helpful to know your style and the style of your partner or your friends or your family members, because it can be helpful to work on a compromise. So if you're a pursuer, but you know your partner's a withdrawer, you might say, okay, let's take a 15-minute break. I can deal with that, and then we'll come back and finish this conversation. Okay, so now we're gonna do a little activity of love languages. So I think everyone has a paper. If you don't have one, let me know. And just go through and pick the one that best describes you from the pair of sentences. I'll give you a few minutes to do that. And when you're done going through all of the pairs, total the number from each letter and put that at the bottom. There should be all of the letters at the bottom of the backside. Give about another minute or so. Okay, so finish up if you haven't yet, but the letter with the highest score is your primary love language. Usually we have about two that are kind of competing for first, but whichever one is highest, or if you have a tie between the two highest, those are your love languages. So gathering from that, from the questions that are on there, based on your top two love language, what do you think those love languages say about how you like to be shown that you're loved or cared about? Think about in relationships, family, friends, partners. What are the things that they do that show you that they really care about you? Shout it out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, spend interrupted time. Did I hear that right? Yeah, okay. So maybe quality time is on your top. Mm-hmm. What else? Yeah, definitely. That might come under doing like acts of service. Yeah. What are some other ones? We got two in the love languages. There's three more out there. Sorry? Hugs, yeah, physical touch. Okay. If you want the mic, please raise your hand. Or just shout it out. That's all right too. Sticky notes. Yeah. So words of affirmation. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's one more. Who has an example for that? Even if it's not your primary love language, give it a try. Food, key to the heart, right? That one's probably under gifts. Okay, well, I appreciate you going through that with me. So those are the 5 love languages. This can also be similar, not just with romantic partners, but with friends and family as well. So I'll go through each of them a little bit in more detail. Acts of service. Anything you can do to ease the burden of responsibilities weighing on someone who has a primary love language of acts of service will speak volumes. The words they want to hear is, let me help you with that, or let me do that for you. Laziness, broken commitments, and making more work for them, it's not really a good way to get on the good side of someone with this particular love language. Words of affirmation. So if this is your love language, compliments are good for you, help you feel loved and cared about. Hearing stuff like I love you or I care about you can be really important, and feeling that you're, again, cared about and loved. On the flip hand, insults can also be really painful for people who prefer words of affirmation. Quality time. Sometimes, we like you said, uninterrupted time. Maybe that's putting our phones down or watching our favorite show together or something like that. Something that, even if you're not talking or not doing anything in particular, you know that that person is enjoying spending their time with you. Physical touch. Touch can go a long way for folks, whether it's a hug or holding hands or just a touch on the arm every once in a while can really make them feel loved and cared about. Receiving gifts, not only, I think sometimes the first thing we think of is material stuff, also hard on a student budget, but it's not just about materialism. A lot of the people who have this as their primary love language appreciate the thought that goes into the gift. And so sometimes it's more about the thought than the actual gift itself, just that someone's thinking about them and someone went out of their way to do something nice for them. Okay, healthy and nonviolent communication. This is really, really helpful in romantic relationships where things can kind of escalate a little bit quickly, or it's hard to kind of put our emotions aside and understand what our partner is telling us. So there's a process that we can use to help that. The first is observation. Observe what's happening in the situation that's affecting you. Feeling, state how you feel when you observe this action. Feeling words are really helpful, especially in romantic relationships, as well as I statements. State what you need and what those needs, what feelings are connected to the needs. Ask for a specific, concrete action. That is really helpful because sometimes we go into things and it's like, what do you want from me? But without asking that in a nicer way, or sometimes saying like, hey, I really need this from you, it can be hard for us and our partners to know what we want. So here's a little how-to for that. Let's get some examples. Who wants to throw an action that they can observe from their friend or their partner? Something that maybe doesn't sit super well with you. Not like, oh, thanks for bringing me lunch. Yeah. So if it were me, maybe I would say, when no one responds to my questions, right, that's the action, I feel like I'm not being listened to, for example, right? Then I might say, because I need to feel listened to when I'm doing a presentation. And I would like it if we can have a more conversational presentation today. Huh? Yeah, see how that was? How was that to hear? What did that feel like to hear? Did it feel okay? Okay, I'm a therapist, so sorry. Other examples. Think about your relationships with people where they've pissed you off or irritated you or done something that you did not like. Let's get one more example so we make sure we know how to do this. It's going to be helpful, I promise. Yes, thank you. Sure. Perfect. Thank you. How was that to hear, Liz? What? How was that to hear? Well, it's real life, so it's Is that more pleasant to hear than, God, Liz, you're so annoying when you don't answer my Snapchats? Okay. It's a little more productive, I think, than just saying like Snapchat. There you go. More productive, right? Getting an understanding of what's coming up. Yes. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on. It's going to be okay. All right, I'm going to do a little warning here. This might be uncomfortable for folks, but we're going to get through it, I promise. Okay? All right. We're going to move on from regular communication to sexual communication. Saucy, I know. Who knows what sexual communication is? Body language? Yeah, that's one way. There are many ways. I'll give you that clue. What else? Consent. Yes, absolutely. What else? Don't worry, I'm going to tell you. Sexual communication is any type of communication, nonverbal or otherwise, on any platform, phone, Skype, all of that stuff, about sexual activity or sexual relationships. Various platforms include, shout them out. Snapchat, that's in there. What else? I wish I could pick out the ones that you say, but I can't. That was just the first one. Okay, so freebie, in person, Snapchat, what else? Text message, Sorry? Writing, yes. What else? Okay, I'm dating myself, but phone calls. But I have text messages first. Okay, so we pretty much got all of them. Facebook, Snapchat, FaceTime, Skype, nonverbal, leaving notes. Do you know what else? I'm going to share a secret with you right now. Even sexting is a form of verbal communication. Sorry, sexual communication. It's not verbal. Did anyone think about that? And they just didn't say it? Okay, there you go. Text message, Snapchat. There's so many platforms where sexting can happen, right? Yeah. So why is talking about or thinking about sexual communication important? It keeps it interesting? Okay. Yeah. I like that. I didn't think about that before, but I like it. I'm going to use that one. What else? Why else is it important? Consent. Yeah, absolutely. Boundaries. Yeah, communicating those so everyone knows. Yeah. Why else might sexual communication be important? I don't have anything in mind. I'm just leaving the floor open. Yep, what you like, what you don't like, so that everyone has fun, right? Sorry. Needs being met, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Studies show that increased sexual communication is positively related to increased relationship satisfaction. What? All of your minds are blown right now, I know this. Yeah? Would anyone have thought about that? Does it make sense? Yeah, makes sense. So the more we communicate, the less likely we are to be unsure or confused or operating from a different understanding than our partners. Kind of goes in with the getting our needs met, right? Making sure we know what people want, they know what we want, all of that fun stuff. It also helps ensure more sexual satisfaction by being able to communicate our needs and our boundaries. Okay, so in sum, you want to be these guys. Good. Not these guys. Bad. Bad times. Consent. We had a couple consents thrown out earlier. Why is consent important? You don't want to force anyone to drink the tea. All right, you're getting a little ahead of me, but that's okay. Why else is communicating consent important? Yep, everyone's in the know. Absolutely. Anything else folks can think of? Why consent is important? So no one gets arrested. That's a good one. Yep. You don't want legal problems. That costs a lot of money. Yep. Anything else? Yep. Absolutely. Getting continuous consent. So we had some mention earlier of boundaries. So in case folks don't know, boundaries are personal lines that are not to be crossed. Sexual boundaries are sexual dislikes one does not wish to engage in. So there are 4 types of consent that we're going to talk about today. The first is informed consent. Has anyone heard that before? If you're doing research or anything like that, you have to get informed consent from the participants. Make sure they know why you're doing what you're doing, what it might be used for. Same kind of thing goes for sexual communication. You and your partner should know all the risks. Are you comfortable with having sex or whatever sexual activity you might want to engage in? Does anyone have STIs that other folks need to be aware about, and can they make a decision about their sexual health? So informing them of that. Is this a one-time thing that's going to happen, or are we in a committed relationship, right? So if you're going to have a hookup with someone, is it going to be ongoing? Is it a one and done? What's going on, right? So even that can be part of informed consent. Enthusiastic consent. Has anyone heard about that? Maybe, maybe not. Yep, exactly. Yes means yes. And both you and your partner should want to participate. And if either person feels hesitant, everyone should stop and reevaluate. Unless you can get that enthusiastic, yes, I'm on board, you should probably think it through. Continuous consent, like someone mentioned before, getting consent as things change, things get switched up. You want to make sure everyone is still on board with all the things going on. So if you change it around or you do something different, you want to make sure you're getting consent at every change. Yeah, does that make sense? Consent without coercion, what might that be? Intoxication, yeah. Yeah, making someone feel pressured, absolutely. So that's what you don't want to do. Both people should consent, and that should not be dictated by pressure. You want to make sure no one's feeling pressured or feeling guilty or feeling badgered to kind of do something that they might not want to do. You also want to give them space to say, this is not something I want to do right now. So coercion is not consent, just as simple as can be, right? Any questions about any of this? Okay. Now we're going to watch a video.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they go, "Oh my God, I would love a cup of tea, thank you." Then you know they want a cup of tea.
Oh no. All right. Be one with us, YouTube gods.
Love a cup of tea, thank you. Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they're like, I'm not really sure." Then you can make them a cup of tea, or not, but be aware that they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important bit, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you're entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say, no thank you, then don't make them tea at all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, yes, please, that's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind, and you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they are unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea, and they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea, and they said yes, but in the time it took you to boil the kettle or brew the tea and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down, make sure the unconscious person is safe, and this is the important part again, don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they are safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it, going, but you wanted tea last week, or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat, going, but you wanted tea last night. If you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you are able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to make myself a cup of tea.
Questions about tea or consent? Okay. So how do you give and or get consent? Yeah. Ask them. Yeah. Do you want to do this? Great. Do you have something else? Mm-hmm. Yep. Definitely. How can you give consent? Say yes or no. Mm-hmm. How can you make sure you're on the same page about what's going to happen? Mm-hmm. Yep. Be direct. Absolutely. Best way to avoid miscommunication. Mm-hmm. Which is my point number 1. Oh, okay. All of the points. Don't be afraid to be direct. It might seem or feel awkward at first, but it will become more comfortable the more you do it. There's this societal stigma that asking for consent is not sexy, but I'll tell you something, it is. Try it for yourself and you will see. So even though it can be awkward or feel uncomfortable at first, even so, again, the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll get. Even if it's not as comfortable at first, it's a few seconds of maybe slightly awkward for an experience full of fun, right? Worth it? Worth it? Yeah? Okay. Another way to give and get consent is to make specific requests. I would like to do this. I would not like to do this. Speak up if you're unsure. Like the tea said, I thought I wanted tea, but I'm not so sure now. Can I have a few minutes to think about it, right? Check in with your partner. How are you doing? Is everything okay? Are you still enjoying yourself? Are you still having fun? Yes? Cool. Keep going. Other ideas. Speak up if you change your mind. Consent can be withdrawn at any time, regardless of whether you've started something or you already consented to something. If you change your mind, you can stop at any point in time, as can your partner. Even if you're having the time of your life and someone says, no, stop, listen to them and stop. Ask every time and be open to any response. Accept a no just as readily as you would a yes. And don't make people feel bad about it. Be assertive, not passive or aggressive, like we talked about before, right? Clearly communicate your needs and your boundaries. Participate equally in decision making. Consider your partner's thoughts and feelings as important as your own thoughts and feelings. How can you increase your communication overall, whether it be sexual or general communication with your partner, your family, your friends? This is the quiz part of the presentation. Find common interests. How would that help your communication? Okay. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Make eye contact as you're having a conversation. I think that's good. The thing with that I would recommend is knowing your partner's preference on that, right? For some folks, looking each other in the eye is not okay. For other people, it is okay, and it does communicate, like I'm here listening to you, right? So check on that and then work with those things. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Say what you mean, absolutely. That kind of sugar coating, candy coating doesn't always lead to super clear communication. Absolutely. Yeah, knowing each other's love languages and your own so you can communicate that. Yeah, how would you do that? Huh? Yeah, even just saying like, hey, I took this quiz and I found out that I really value spending quality time with you. Can we do more of that, or can we make sure we do that on a regular basis? For sure. How else can you increase your communication? Okay, I'll help you out. Practice active listening. Who knows what active listening is? Uh-huh. Absolutely. Yeah. A really easy way to do that, a fun little exercise, is to listen to the person that you're talking with. Once they're done talking, tell them what they just said. Summarize what they said. Say, I heard you say this. Is that right? Make sure that they say, yes, that is right, or ask for clarification if you're unsure, and then respond with what you want to say, right? After you know that you've heard them and they know that you've heard them. Mm-hmm. Be direct with your want and needs. Say what you want, say what you do not want, and be clear about that. Absolutely. Be sure to communicate your boundaries, whether that's in a relationship, I only want to spend 3 days a week with you, or I only want to do this, that, and the other sexual activity with you, whatever it is, communicate those boundaries. And it's also really helpful to talk about your preferences, especially regarding sexual activity, in a neutral time and place. Can also make things feel a little bit less awkward when the heat of the moment comes up. So talking about your sexual preferences and boundaries completely detached from sex or sexual activity can be really helpful for knowing ahead of time before you go into those situations what your partner does and doesn't want. And vice versa, they know what you do and don't want as well. Anything else that people can think about? Do these seem like reasonable things that you could integrate into your relationships with folks? Yeah? Not too hard, right? Don't have to reinvent the wheel. Okay, last thing. Become a sexual communication hero. Get that consent, give that consent. Stop when that consent is taken away or is not given, and all of that fun stuff. That's it. Thanks, everyone.